All right, we're going to call this meeting to order at 4 o'clock, the special LCAP meeting at 4 o'clock. And we'll take a roll call. So if you are here, please let me know when I call your name. Dr. Freeman? Trustee Vallejo? Trustee Stafford? Myself, Trustee Nelson, and Dr. Arauz is not with us yet, but he will be here. So we do have a quorum. So that takes us to 3.1, invitation to address the Board of Trustees on closed session items only. Any takers?
No takers.
No takers. And that leads us to 4.1, adjourn to closed session. Do I have a motion? Dr. Freeman and Trustee Stafford.
It's not necessary to go to closed session, so
Okay, so we just bypass it?
we don't have to take
Okay.
a vote on that then.
Then we will just, okay.
But we would like to recess the meeting.
So we'll reset. Okay, so we will now take this, since open session does not start till 5, we'll take a recess. So this meeting is recessed at 4:01 p.m. All right, we will reconvene this LCAP board meeting at 5 o'clock. You're right, I always do that. Let's go back. All right, that leads us to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Please be seated. Since we didn't have closed session, I doubt we have a report out of closed session.
No report.
Okay, thank you. All right, 7.1, our invitation to address the Board of Trustees on non-agendized items. No takers.
No takers.
Thank you. 8.1, curriculum. This is the public hearing for the Local Control Accountability Plan and annual update for 2022-23. It is also a public hearing. So first, do we have a motion? Dr. Freeman and Trustee Vallejo. And so we will go to the public hearing. Yep. We're going to open the public hearing at 5:01 p.m. Don't give away my secrets. All right. Does anybody want to come up to speak from the public on for the public hearing?
We have a presentation.
We do have a presentation. All right.
So that would be Miss Martin, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. Are we doing ours first?
You're ready. You're batting lead off.
Am I going to be in control of the slides?
You have the power.
Oh, God. I just need to make sure, oh, it's on.
It's on.
Well, we are gathered here tonight to review our LCAP plan for 21 to 24. So as you know, what we've done this past year is to present to the board data. I know that Julie had shared some data in the fall, and then Charles Tippie came back in February, shared some data on LCAP Goal 1, and then Dr. Garcia and myself were here in February with our mid-year LCAP report sharing out Goals 3 and 4. So the way we have it structured tonight is really just we're sharing the same data points that's part of our LCAP. So we're going to go over like the final data points. Now, some of them are still to be determined since school is still in session. So we have until Fridays for some of these data points to be measured. And so we're hoping to bring those back to you on the 15th. So as you know, our focus in our LCAP is always around our 4 LCAP goals. I don't think I need to spend too much time kind of going over that. This year, or for 23-24, our LCFF funds are projected at $129 million. Our supplemental concentration, which is what focuses the dollars and the goals, actions, and services in our LCAP, are just over $24 million. So that will be, you'll see through the PowerPoint presentation that is dispersed in our goals, actions, and services for next year. So I'm going to go ahead. We are going to take turns, so I won't be talking the whole night. That will save some minutes for the presentation. If you were here for the last board meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles Tippy, and he's going to walk you through Goals 1.
Yep. Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon still. So I'm going to talk about goal number 1 and the annual update metrics for this, and then our actions and services. Diane mentioned that a lot of this data we shared with you back in February, so it'll be pretty quick as we go through. The first metric is the English Learner Progress Indicator. So this metric looks at our English learners, and it combines the EL reclassification rates. So those students that reclassify from English learner to fluent English proficient, and then also the current year LPAC score, so the EL proficiency assessment. Unfortunately, because of the disruption in both 2020 and limited testing in 2021, the state won't be reporting on any of the academic indicators or the LP until not next year, but the year after, because it requires 2 years of data to look at both status and change. So no LP, official LP for this year, but we're going to try and present what we do have. So the first one, the EL reclassification rate, our baseline from 18-19 was 6%. We set a goal for ourselves in 2023-24 to get up to 12%. Unfortunately, in 2021, our rate was only 2.5%, and the big reason for that is because students need to get a 4 on the LPAC to reclassify, and testing was disrupted in 2020, and the kids didn't get a chance to test. So 2020-21 rate was really low, 2.5%. Very, very happy and proud to share preliminary unofficial data right now that our reclass rate is about 18%. We were calling kids or parents this morning to congratulate them and finalize the reclassification process. So we're still making calls tomorrow for kids that got a 4 in the LPAC this year. So right now we're about 18%. I'm really hoping that we get up to 20%, and that's been a big focus of the EL leadership team, is just really getting kids to reclassify, looking at the students that got a 4 in the LPAC and providing additional supports and interventions and motivation to get them over that hump and then get them out of the program. The other metric that it looks at is the actual performance on the test scores themselves. Once again, the LP looks at both status, so how many kids do you get in level 4? That's the goal, is that we get them up to level 4. And then how are kids doing? You know, we might have our newcomer students that went from a 1 to a 2, so the state celebrates that as well. So it does look at both status and change. Once again, unfortunately, we didn't have scores in 2020, so they can't do the change part of it. So what we can present to you is the data from 2021. The overall scores are listed there. When we looked at compared data from 2019, that's the best that we could do, we did see about a 5% decrease in scores. But once again, that was just, we were testing during distance learning. I was testing in literally to the last day of July, trying to get the kids in to finish their tests, and we were all remote. So it was pretty challenging for that. I know our scores this year are going to be better, so that. These 2 annual SARC for teacher credentialing, very important that all of our teachers are credentialed and our kids have access to instructional materials. That's kind of a standard one that's required in the LPAC, and we always meet that, so no problem there. This slide is very, very busy. It shows what the actual dashboard looks like. Once again, status and change. Baseline from 2020-21 and what we expected for 2023-24. We do focus on every single numerically significant subgroup, so that's why you see the different status and change there. And then we also look at each one individually to create goals. So our outcomes here on the far right, this is based on just the testing from 2021. So remember, this is testing that happened a year ago. and it looks at just the percentage of students that met or exceeded the standard. And if you remember back in the presentation from before, we did see about a 5% increase in both, and 5% increase in ELA and about a 2.5% increase in math. The big challenge on that, though, is we only ended up testing about 60% of our students. So CDE really cautions us on comparing 2021 scores with 2019 scores because of all those, challenges going on with COVID. So can't really read into that too much. Math was similar, about a 2.5% increase overall, and then the subgroups were very similar increases also. Our actions, we didn't make any changes to the actions, so we still have action 1.1 that's focused on literacy across the curriculum. That's going to be a big focus for us. I believe Mr. Bruff's going to talk about that towards the end when we tie everything together. We have our MTSS focus as well. Moving on to 1.3, instructional technology. As we all know, distance learning was a huge challenge for our students, and all the work that we did with our educational technology was very, very important, and we're continuing on with that. And then also our 1.4 with English Learner Supplemental Services, really focusing on both designated ELD, so protected time during the school day where teachers are focused on the ELD standards, and then bridging that out into the content areas as well with integrated ELD, making sure that our math teachers, science, history teachers are using those ELD standards and supporting them when they're implementing those. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Zero to talk about Goal 2.
All right, as we talked about before, this is a lot of stuff that we've covered when we did the college and career readiness presentation. I believe it was in November when we presented that information. So the outcomes that you'll see are based on the 2021 data. So when we look at the graduation rate, our outcome for that graduation rate in the 2021 school year was 90.1. As an estimate right now, just looking at this year's senior graduates, we have 2,154 graduates that we're projecting right now. That's not obviously the end result. We won't know that until all the graduations happen this week. But we're looking at around 91.2% graduation rate if we calculate it based on those numbers. Obviously, that is just our senior class. That's not your cohort graduation rate. We want to make sure that we wait until that official data comes out for that cohort data. When we look at A to G completion, just a reminder that it was at about 40%, which was a big increase from the 2021 school year. But also keeping in mind that increase was based on the ability for students to take a pass or fail versus the letter grade. So there might be some changes when we look at that coming up in this coming year because that rule does not apply for this school year. As of right now, we sometimes know that CD does change their mind as we move through the summer, and we might see some changes with that. But as of right now, that's based upon our the regular calculation for A to G. And then just looking at, also I want to make the reminder too, with the graduation rates for this year, we do have the ability to give students a diploma based on the 130 credits, which is from AB 104. So you will have some students that get their diploma based on those graduation requirements. AP scores, we're looking at 31.1%. It's pretty flat from the year of 2021 when we had those AP tests, and that was when we had all of the tests being taken through distance learning. So it stayed pretty flat this past year, and hoping that those scores will continue to go up as we have that face-to-face instruction. I think we're going to see some growth with that based on the students being face-to-face with their teachers. And then this college and career indicator, there was no indicator this year available for the 2021 school year because of COVID, but we did show that increase up to, we had a 5% increase from the previous year. So in 1920, it was about 30%, and then in 2021, we did get up to the 35% mark. So we did show 5% increase right before we went out on COVID. EAP scores, this is based on the CAPS test, just like Mr. Tippy just shared. We didn't have any data available for that, so we don't have any measurement for that, but we will continue to have those kids taking the CASP, and we'll have that data within the next 2 years when that's measured again. And then avid participation, this is something that we've been focused on for a long time, and we did show a little bit of a dip based on the distance learning and having some challenges with recruitment during COVID, but we did see some increase this year. So this was the 2021 data was 1,818 students, where this year we did go up about 100 students, and we're around 1,900 students this year with the avid participation. These are somewhat new with how they look at the CT pathway completion and also the CT pathway completion with the A to G requirements also met. So this was a newer metric for us. We did see some good growth in both of the indicators looking at CTE. We had about a 5% increase in students with pathway completion as well as A to G completion. So we've already passed the goal that we had for ourselves set for, or almost passed the goal for 2023. And so we're looking forward to seeing a little bit more growth with that, with Liberty opening and all of the pathways. We should see some growth once we have that graduating class with Liberty. And then FAFSA completion, we did have a little bit of a challenge with 2021 where we had about 72% of our students complete the FAFSA. And just to remind you that that doesn't include our students that are SH. We generally don't have our students fill that out, but that is the state percentage that they give us based on the CSAC website. So those kids are still calculated in that percentage, but when we look at our own data and don't look at the CSAC, our data is much higher. We have very few students that actually opt out in the long run for that. And this year we're looking at about 82% of our students have completed the FAFSA, and that again also includes those SH students. And then our actions and services, we stuck to the same 4 that we had before. When we're looking at those opportunities for remediation, that really ties into the extra period that we have, some of our credit recovery programs. We've seen those to be very effective. We're using a lot of that also with looking at what summer school can support our students with as well. We have a very large summer school again this year that we're really excited about. Just with our gen ed teachers, without the special ed calculation, we have about 85 sections across the district for summer school. At all of the campuses are offering it except for Paris Lake and Scholar Plus, and PALS will be actually over at Paris High this year. So we have a big summer school as well to help with some of that credit recovery from COVID. And then just the continued growth in our CTE pathways, the addition with Liberty and their pathways, as well as just building upon some of the pathways we have currently at our schools. Our goal is always to create those completers as well as providing job opportunities after they graduate. So really looking at that next step. I know Ms. Martin might be talking about this a little bit later also, is just really adding that extra layer with those internships is really the goal that we're looking for in the next year or two, is to get those kids in the actual work setting. And then the last 2 action items are really focused around the college and career readiness with our counseling support. That looks at our kickoff to college or college applications, FAFSA, as well as how to support students with their programs as they go through their 4 years of high school. And we've seen those programs to be very beneficial. We're looking forward to having some counseling support at the district office this coming year to support that A to G grant as well. And so looking forward to some of the growth areas that will also be able to pick up some momentum on with that as well. And I am going to hand it off to Dr. Garcia for goal number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that you put into all this. And it seems to me that a lot of it is where they're making you try to compare not only apples and oranges, but fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
You're trying to make some kind of a leap from here to here, and even the mode of transportation isn't the same as it was.
Yeah.
It just begins to sound like how she tries to do it, but
Yeah. I think but that's kind of the fun part I think that we've started to experience is looking at each of our students as individual students. And although we have a lot of students and it's hard to have that individual connection with each student, really having that post-secondary plan for every student, whatever that looks like, is really the ultimate goal, whether it's going to college, the military, some kind of trade school, or if they're ultimately going into a job, our hope is that before they graduate from high school, they can have, here's where I'm going to work. We want them to already have that job. We don't want them to leave high school without having that plan in place. And so I think that that's kind of the next step we're really going to be able to build on as we move into the next couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. President. two comments and two questions.
Sure.
And I apologize in advance because I have a question also for Mr. TP. First of all, thank you for preparing this presentation. We know that it has been very difficult during the last few years, right? However, even though we don't have the data to compare, but we are looking at the actual, at the outcomes. Something that I might have missed, and probably David can help me, probably this was already presented. That data is wonderful, but remember that the cornerstone of ensuring equity is the desegregation. How have we been doing with those percentages, like A through G completion, 39.9%? This percent for African Americans, English learners, special ed, foster youth, have that been presented in previous? Okay, because I believe that was our commitment and our request for several years, and I reiterated that request at the beginning of this year to keep that, don't lose focus of that goal, right, of ensuring the best possible education for all. And that is one of the ways, right? Because we can have 39.9, which is wonderful. Don't take me wrong, but what is the percent for African Americans? What is the percent for ELs? And we're really laser focusing on ensuring equity. What can
We
you
most
share with
definitely
us?
look at that information, and I think that we could definitely dive a little bit deeper in one of these presentations. What I would probably suggest is maybe we chunk it, because there is so much data when we look at the different demographics and the different metrics. There's 9 metrics. We want to make sure that we're in as much detail with all of the metrics, not just 1 or 2 of them. So we might want to look at chunking them in smaller chunks for the metrics in
Yeah,
the fall.
well, with all due respect, I don't think that is in order for us to present the information, is for every goal, and for every matrix, just having the desegregation. We have ELs, African American Spirit, and foster youth, and we can see if there is a significant discrepancy, then there is a need, and we need to address that through the LCAP. So I think that is the gist of the LCAP, right? And we are getting those concentration funds, that's how we call them. Yeah, supplemental and concentration, right, for those subgroups.
Yeah.
And we need to act upon that because that is the spirit of the law and the main objective.
Yeah,
of
we definitely
the-
talk about those things, especially during the course request process. We talk about the differences in enrollment and how our different sites are looking at it, and the discrepancies from site to site can be very different when we look at that as well. And making sure that there's opportunities. Dual enrollment is another big one that we really pay a lot of attention to, is making sure that kids understand, especially because if they're home with parents that haven't gone to college, they don't know how to navigate that college process. And so being able to walk hand in hand with them. The counseling teams at the school sites that work with dual enrollment, they do a really good job of that outreach piece and making sure that they're connecting with all of the students, and that's based on the data that they review.
No, and that's perfectly fine. I don't have a doubt of that, right? And I know that they are doing a very good job, but we need to quantify the degree of the very good job with the specific subgroups. That's what I think we are interested in. We have been historically, at least in the last 6-7 years.
Yeah.
We have
No, we
been
most
pushing
definitely can
for that.
Provide that to you.
Okay. And not only to provide it to us, I think it's important for the decision-making process to identify those areas that there is the need for improvement and act upon that. So I would like that you don't see it
So
as
are you asking that we can possibly do something for the August board meeting, put together something for the August board meeting?
yeah,
Just to jump in, and that should fall on me, because I certainly lead this team, and you have made that request very clear. We did put on the next meeting for June.
Next week,
An
okay.
LCAP update based on questions that you had or things that you might
Okay,
want to deeper
okay,
dive on.
yes.
Because we realized this could have been a very, very lengthy presentation today. So we have a follow-up already booked for oral report, and a few other data points that you had asked for last meeting, but we don't have the results yet with the passing rates. And so we have an oral update for you that's more disaggregated and has some
Yeah.
results. So this is a big picture for 3 years where we're heading, and we can certainly bring you that more specific look in 2 weeks. I believe we're back.
No, thank you, Mr. Brove.
Week and a half,
Yeah.
that's
Week and a
really
half,
quick.
actually.
But I just would like, and that's wonderful, and I appreciate that. But one more time, on the action plan, on the LCAP, right, on the local,
Absolutely.
include that, we identify those areas that need improvement, and this is what we are going to be doing with all those $1 million that we have been identified.
Well, and it's important to remember that this is a study session in that we're presenting this
Oh,
to you.
yeah.
This is a working draft, and it is exactly to get that kind of input from you.
Exactly, yeah.
And we will be sure to include that, and you've been very clear, so please forgive me.
Okay, no,
We
not
should
a
have followed that directive, but we'll update it and get it back to you.
That's fine, yeah. The important thing, like in every process, is identify the area of improvement, like in this case, included on the LCAP, and just move forward with that.
Dr. Freeman,
Excellent.
you had
Thank you.
a question?
As long as we're talking about this, I was wondering, do we have some kind of a comparison of those who just do the 130 as opposed to those who do the, what, 210?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
I do have an estimate of that. I don't have it in my head, but I do have it already that we provided in the, I think it was in the weekly update this week for you all is for, and that was just based on Friday. So those numbers do change the week of graduation, but I can definitely, before the end of the board meeting, I can pull that up for you guys if you'd like to know the specifics.
That we can have.
Yeah.
we can do that.
We'll have solid numbers, the actual
we can be
numbers
locked in.
for the next board meeting.
The second part of my question, yeah, that would be for Mr. Tipi. First of all, Mr. Tipi, and I want to say thank you to all the language services or EL services department for the increase on the reclassification to 18%. Even though couple of years ago, it was 12%, right?
Yes.
But it was a big jump to 18%, so that is wonderful. I just wanted to look at things in context. That 18% is 18% of the students who are level 4, or 18% of all the ELs.
All the ELs. So
all the
at the start of the school year, we had approximately 1,850 EL students, and we've reclassified, we will reclassify about 19 to 20% by the end of the school year. So.
Excellent,
So
thank
we've
you.
been really trying to hustle to get those phone calls made and make sure the kids are ready to have a great year next year.
Great, excellent.
And is that
Thank you.
reclassification all the way up to RFEPs, or is that somewhere just to the next classification level?
Oh.
Those are students that transition from an English learner into a reclassified.
So completely,
fluent-
okay.
Yeah, so they're out of the EL program completely.
Yeah. And the next question, Mr. Tipi. You mentioned about integrated ELD.
Yes.
In the classes, and that you make sure that our staff, in this case, our teachers, provide that. I'm just wondering, how do you make sure that, or the district makes sure that the integrated ELD classes are really addressing the ELD standards, supporting the students in the subject matter?
So we had a really good question. We're trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID. We had a training, all-staff training in the spring of last year, specifically on integrated ELD. So with our new, in our LCAP, we have a plan for an ELA coach and a EL coach as well. So providing additional training for those staff members. One of the things that we did in the training was we had not necessarily a lesson plan, but a sample PLC agenda where the teams sat down, we modeled this for them, so we did a lesson plan that included the integrated ELD standards, modeled that for the teachers, and then let them work in their PLC subcommittees to develop lesson plans to implement those strategies with the students.
Yeah.
And then,
And if I could add
Thank
to
you.
that, the last slide that I will be presenting to you is on steps for next year. And that's a major area of focus, and we'll talk about some things that we're doing to improve that.
Okay, no, thank you for explaining that. However, my question, maybe I didn't explain myself. I skipped the question asking about the potential training, right? Because it was implied in
Yes,
the
sure,
presentation.
yeah.
So I assume that it was there. But my question specifically is, how are we making sure? Because one thing is provide the training, developing the lesson plan. How do we make sure that that really transfers into the classroom, that our students are really benefiting from that? I had been in different trainings about ELs, about the ELD standards, but training the teachers, that doesn't necessarily mean, and we know that, and one of the characteristics here is that we speak with the truth, and we are very transparent.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And it called my attention when you mentioned that we are making sure that the ELD integrated classes are providing the ELD standards to the students. So the question is, let me rephrase it. How are we making sure that that is happening in the classroom?
Yeah, so no, it's a
Kind
really
of
good
a
point.
walkthrough, or I don't know.
Absolutely. So one of the, we went through our federal program monitoring in August, September of this school year. And one of the things that they emphasize exactly what you said. We provide training, we have to see it in action. It has to actually reach the classroom. So that's one of our focuses. Every time we do a training, we need to document who attends it and then what's happening afterwards. So like you mentioned, we started out at the initial level in a collaborative sense where the teachers would develop their lesson planning templates. Really great activity. We did the training, and then we had the teachers submit their lesson plan templates in a Google form. So we had sample forms for all the subcommittee PLCs across the district. And then we kind of, our next step is to identify the teams some of the teams did really well with that. Some of them struggled with it a little bit, but
Yeah, it's
highlight
normal.
those forms. And then we eventually need to see it in the classroom, which would be working with the site administrators to observe that. We have some activities planned at our leadership training in July to work with the admin on those kinds of walkthroughs and observing that in the classroom.
Okay, so just to be clear, we are working on that, on
Absolutely.
making sure that that is transferring.
Yeah.
So we haven't done it yet, but there is the plan to work with the site administration. And it can be in the form of walkthroughs, in the form of teams observing other teachers, providing feedback.
Yes.
And all of that. Yeah, thank you, sir.
I'll say things they
Yeah,
might not want to
thank
say as directors, but if we're completely transparent, that has been the challenge with every aspect of implementation this year, and that is releasing teachers to get training time with them and follow up with them. And that's a goal for next year across the board, not just for ELs, but in every aspect of curriculum instruction. So it is a goal, and I think we have to be transparent and say it was an area of weakness this year because it was hard to pull people.
No, and that's perfect,
But
and
it's a
that's
fair
very
question,
understandable.
and a
Yeah.
focus we need to have for next year.
Yeah, no, how I'm saying, and I'm going to say it again, I just wanted to know, because that was wonderful when you mentioned,
Yeah.
we are making sure that they say, what are you doing? You know, so that, I wanted to know.
And part of it might be
you know,
optimism
see,
that the
because I know it has been very challenging to do it, so I just wanted to learn.
And part of it might be our enthusiasm that we've reached that 18, perhaps 20%, that something must be working because the ingredients are there and the meal seems to be coming out pretty well. But we need to be more dedicated and intentional about it. And that's certainly an area of focus for next year.
Yeah, and even though you identified it as a weakness, Mr. Broff, but the results are speaking by themselves.
But
So
that's not enough, and we're hearing.
Yes, and that's wonderful, hearing that. It's not enough until we have everybody, even though we're having that big improvement. No, thank you both.
Thank you.
All these flies.
Sorry about that. I don't know what we're doing about the flies. I have no idea.
Well, good evening. This evening, we're going to do a deep dive in goal number 3, which includes suspensions, expulsions, and our interventions. And as you can see on the screen, currently the suspension rate is below the baseline percentage identified during the 2019-2020 school year for all students, African American students, and students with disabilities. You can see in the outcomes section that as of April of this year, the suspension rate for all students was 3.70%, which was higher than last year. And then keep in mind, last year, with the pandemic and COVID and the school closures, we didn't have suspensions. I believe we had just one suspension. So last year, the suspension rate for all students was lower. However, in the current year, the suspension rate was also lower than the 2019-2020 baseline. Similarly, for students in the African American subgroup, this year in April, as of April, was 6.8%, higher than last year, lower than the baseline school year. Likewise, with the suspension rate for students with disabilities, this year, 10.9%. Higher than last year and also higher than the baseline. So you will notice that for African American and also for students with disability, the suspension rate is higher than all students. We acknowledge that, and if you recall, back in April and in February, we had talked about that we know that this is an area that we need to work on, and we're going to be a little bit more intentional this next year. All right, let's see if I can do this. All right. Again, as we look at the current percentages and expulsions, we are below the baseline from 2019-2020, and here we're referring to stipulated expulsions. As with the percentages for suspensions, we did not have any expulsions last year as a result of the pandemic and the school closure. But you will also see that as of April this current year, the expulsion rate was 0.04%, which was higher than last year, lower than the baseline school year. We're also below the baseline school year. We're below the baseline percentage for the dropout rate in both middle and high school in comparison to the baseline school year from 2019-2020. As of April, the percentages were higher than last year in high school than in the 2019-2020 baseline school year. So we knew that coming into this school year that we were going to have some challenges with learning loss and mental health. So we were working and making plans to support students. And with the addition to AB 104, that really helped our students this year. There was light at the end of the tunnel, so they were able to earn their credits using the minimum state requirements of 130, so they were able to finish with their high school diploma. Make sure I have, okay. Yeah, I use them to read, but not for distance. So as you can see, we are below the baseline in attendance rate at 88.2% and the ADA at 90.5% and above the chronic absenteeism rate at 40% compared to the baseline year. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and I know this is review, we had talked about that we had anticipated the negative impact on the physical health and mental health of our students due to students getting ill, families getting ill. So a lot of our kiddos who were sick were either on quarantine or in isolation. We had to send kiddos home if they had symptoms. So not a lot of our students were at school. So that would result in the low attendance rate. And as mentioned earlier, these are percentages that we are going to monitor. So we're going to monitor the suspension percentages, we're going to monitor the expulsion and the attendance for this current year, but these are not official percentages until the state certifies them, but we will certainly use these as baseline percentages as we move forward. In regards to the annual Williams report, we did not have any findings. In addition to the school climate survey, we had approximately 571 students who participated in the survey. So that included our 5th graders, our 7th graders, our 9th graders, and our 11th graders. So that number was higher than this past year, which we had 326 students who participated in that. And in regards to our action and services, as you recall, back in both February and April, I had shared that we were not able to implement all of the interventions that we had planned as a result of not having enough staff. A lot of our staff were out ill, and so we didn't anticipate not having enough sub-coverage. So as you recall, a lot of our district administration had to go out and assist with subbing. So as a result of that, we did have to cancel many of our training opportunities. I do want to say that we were able to move forward with our contract with Positive Solutions. So Teresa Blackard, who is a counselor, offers drug decision-making and substance abuse awareness at all of the sites during the school day, but she was also able to offer that on our Scholar Saturdays. And I am proud to report that she was able to provide services for 344 students district-wide by running 168 positive decision-making groups in addition to 101 substance awareness education groups. So I thought that was an amazing number to be able to reach out to so many students. We were able to move forward with alternative to suspension, which is offered at 2 of our sites, Pinacati Middle School and Paris High School. As you recall, the program offers evidence-based curriculum to support student behavior. The goal is to keep kids in school rather than sending them out on an out-of-school suspension on their first offense. We also had planned to do the Museum of Tolerance field trip for all of our 7th and our 9th graders during the first semester, but unfortunately, because we did not have enough sub-coverage, we weren't able to move forward during the first semester. During the second semester, we were able to provide the field trip opportunity to 2 groups, our foster group, which took place in March, and we also were able to take a small group from Paloma Valley High School who had just finished the Holocaust unit and had just completed reading the reading of Night. And so we were able to take about 130 kiddos, and we had all of our Ed Services support staff who assisted in chaperoning, and it was just a really great experience. Lastly, we were able to follow through with Dr. Julie Hood through Thriving University, and she provided professional development to our staff during our Paris Union High School District CARES professional development in October. And so that was exciting because all of our staff were able to participate in a 3-hour professional development. Next, our next action item was our targeted and intensive support services. As I mentioned at our last board meeting, thanks to all of you, we were able to hire 7 social workers, 1 for each school site. We were also able to hire 5 MTSS counselors who are able to support the work in our wellness centers. And I do want to just report out some data here. During the first semester, the wellness center serviced approximately 3,000 students. And back in April, we were able to service approximately about 2,000 students through our wellness centers by our support staff. So I thought that that was just an amazing opportunity to make sure that we were able to connect our students with caring adults who are able to provide that support as they're going through crisis throughout this school year. And we were also able to move forward with our MTSS leads. They collaborated this past year with counselor, with the administrator, and they worked together to roll out SEL lessons through the use of Thrively and Ripple Effects through our 9th grade classes, our college and career classes. The only school site that did it a little different was Paris Lake High School, and they met with their students on an individual or small group basis. For student engagement and participation, I worked with all of the sites, with the assistant principals over the attendance department, and we created SMART goals for each school site. They identified a realistic goal that they were able to focus on and work on each month. They also created an incentive program. If you recall, back in April, I had shared with you some of the wonderful things that the sites had put together, particularly Heritage High School, who put that great big event together for students who had near perfect attendance and those who were making improvement throughout the school year. We've also continued working with Attention to Attendance, also known as A2A. They work with us in sending out letters to families, letters 1, 2, and 3. And just so that you're aware, we actually sent out 22,000 pieces of communication in the form of letters 1, 2, and 3 to connect with families, invite families to the school site, to re-engage them and connect them to a caring staff there. In addition to that, our attendance specialists were also assisting in monitoring, scheduling, and following up with families through scheduling SART meetings. They had assisted with our SARB meetings at the district office. They made daily and weekly phone calls and did home visits throughout the school year for all of the school sites. Oops, I think I left one out. Yes. In regards to safety and security, all of our staff are required to complete the training through Keenan in Hour Zero, and that needs to be done during the first semester by the end of September. If you've had the opportunity to attend our district safety committee meetings, we have 2, one during the first semester and one during the second semester, and so schools are able to report out that they have which monthly drills that they held. The requirement is that they hold a monthly drill each month throughout the year, and then our campus supervisors continue to have ongoing training throughout the school year. And lastly, our Wellness Center initiative, we were able to open up 7 wellness centers, 1 at each comprehensive high school, at the middle school, at Paris Lake High School, and at CMI. Everyone's done an amazing job in creating a safe space for all of our students. They've purchased comfortable seating, comfortable lighting, materials and supplies. Our social workers and counselors collaborate with the site counselors, the administrators, and they're working together to ensure that they're providing the best mental wellness program for their students. Now, we will continue with all of these action items moving forward. The only one that we won't be moving forward with is this one, the wellness centers, because we've now established them. But we do want to make sure that we set aside some funding for materials and supplies. So the funds for staffing, materials, supplies for the wellness center will continue through state and federal funds for the following school year. And with that, I'm done.
Yeah, one of the things that's going around nationwide is the idea of reducing suspensions and expulsions. And throwing out the last 2 years because it really isn't anything to relate to it. Some people, or some districts have actually been accused of, and probably some actually do, they just say, well, we're just not going to send them home. What do we do with those kids that we might have suspended but didn't, so that it's a positive force other than just saying, well, we've actually reduced our suspension rate? What did we do with the children that actually did not get suspended but could have been, that it was a positive for them?
So we've been working district-wide through our MTSS committees and working with our assistant principals over counseling to put together a progressive discipline. We started having conversations about what does level 1, level 2, level 3 look like, what interventions are in place at each of the school sites, and how can we support students on a first offense, on a second offense, and on a third offense. So we're not looking to move to suspending a student on the first offense unless it's one of the big 5, correct? If excuse me, I lost my train of thought for a second. So just using the progressive discipline and making sure that we're doing everything we can at the sites to educate students and working with the student and the family to help change the behavior before suspending.
Follow up with these kids afterward, after a while, to see, make sure that they're retaining that improved behavior?
So the goal is after a student is suspended, that they return to the school site to meet with the administrator. It's kind of like a check-in. In addition to that, using the wellness centers as part of that support system. So having the student come in, check in with the administrator, referring the student to their school counselor for a check-in, referring the student to the wellness center to meet with the social worker so they can conduct an assessment if there is a need for that, and then rolling out a treatment plan to support the student and the family.
So we're not just taking them in a detention room or something?
I'm sorry?
We're not just taking them in a detention room or something?
Well, no, the hope is that we are working with the school, the family, and the student to help change the behavior. We need to do a little bit more intentional work for this next year. We're going to focus a little bit more on MTSS, and now with the addition of our coordinator, starting this next year, we'll be able to branch out a little bit more at the sites.
If I might venture an opinion, I would think that the last couple of years could be considered our preseason, our spring training game. And that starting with this year, we're actually in the season, because anything happened before this, it'll affect what's going on. I mean, the fact that you have people, higher percentage of kids that are doing this, that, and the other thing is probably directly related to the fact that they haven't been in school.
Absolutely.
And they're now readjusting to doing that. I mean, as bad as it is for the high school kids, I imagine what it was like for the kindergarten kids. You know, my wife went through that. You could tell these kids didn't have any preschool or TK or anything else because of the fact that they just didn't have anything. So that it was like you got them all bringing, they'd never been to school before. And usually
Correct.
you'd have some that did and some that didn't. So I just want to make sure that people understand. I'm sure we're doing it. I just think we make, like, I think in a case that Dr. Ross is talking about too, that we want to make sure that people understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think that the more we let them know that this is what we're doing, it's not just a matter of something that got put in the Washington Post or something that said, yeah, they completely eliminated their suspension rate, but the kids are just sitting there in a room doing nothing.
The work needs to be intentional.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have a question also and a comment. First of all, thank you for this presentation. And I know that this office and Mr. Broff has been working really hard in terms of attendance. You mentioned about the ADA of 88%, but something that caught my attention, you mentioned also about somebody doing home visits. May I ask who is the people who is with home
Yes.
visits?
So we have our 2 attendance specialists, Marlene and Anthony. We just hired Anthony this second semester. So, and I'm glad that you asked because I'm so proud of their work. So overall, we had 412 home visits, 173 for Paris High School, 64 for Heritage High School, 76 for Paloma Valley High School, 60 for Pinacati, 12 for Liberty, and 27 for Paris Lake High School. So our attendance specialists go out. Oftentimes, my social worker, Portia, will go out. The school sites also, if they're able to, they will go out. But our attendance specialists do the bulk of the home visits.
So we have 2 attendance specialists. Are they enough?
I do not
do you
think they
think?
are enough.
This is, yeah, Mr. Broff.
She would like you to give
Would
her
they be
50,
enough,
and,
Mr. Broff?
Candace Ray,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
could always use more,
Yeah.
and we can certainly crunch that and come back to you. I mean, we would love to have an army of people to send out. The 2 that we have are really phenomenal, though, and they are very dedicated people.
And I think that is the key, right? If we have the right people, the right person doing that job. And the direction of my comment and my question is the following. Yeah. As you know, you provided information, I think, a few years ago, that 1% increase on ADA translates into $1 million, right? Probably now it's more.
Yeah, I'm gonna trust your numbers.
Yeah, but now, let's say it's going to be a lot more.
Higher.
Yes, it's definitely higher. So if we don't have enough, if we can do more, because we can identify the students who are chronically absent. And if we need to go and do those home visits, I think it would be a sound financial investment of having more people, of how much we can do that to get, if we increase it by the ADA by 0.5% is probably $750,000 a year, and how much are we going to be paying them? The other thing is that it is a difficult situation that all of our parents and our students are facing. And something that it can be considered, and I know probably you already doing it, Mr. Broff and Dr. Garcia, when you are working with families during the SARP process, to look into the elements, what are the underlying reasons why the students don't want to come. Believe me, and you know this, probably you have more knowledge and more experiences from the perspective, but some of those students, they might be reading at a 3rd grade level. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be in a classroom that they are going to be exposed, or that the teacher is going to ask a question and they don't know how to answer to that. And they don't want to be in the school because of that. So just keeping that is just one example of the multiple examples that you might have. So the question is, it would be fair to take a family to the SARP meeting and through the district attorney, provide a fine or give them a citation to court to penalize the parent when actually it's the school system that we have failed, right? And it's a whole. It's the school system that student is reading at the 3rd grade level. That is
I
behind.
don't think Dr. Garcia will toot her own horn. She just went to a mediation with our district attorney 2 days ago? Last Friday? 3 days ago, yes. And what came out of that was not a punitive mediation with the district attorney. It was an actual plan to work with mental health for this family, to look at the underlying concerns and causation for why they were absent. And they drafted a document. It was just presented to me to support this family for next year. Because I think the days similar to MTSS and discipline of punishing families for not coming to school, they want their kids to come to school. There are reasons from gas to food to literacy to, we could go on, the 40 developmental assets, all the things that may be lacking. The other thing I'd like to emphasize and thank all of you, she hit it briefly, but having that social worker able to go out now with our attendance specialist allows her to do some linkage services that were maybe beyond what our normal attendance specialists ever had the capability of. So they might go out and identify a problem, but not always know how to connect a family with a resource. And we want to, early in the fall, bring our social workers before you so you can see their beautiful faces. They're truly dedicated people. And they've been doing a much better job. Well, it's not a much better job because it never existed before. We now have social workers to do linkage that never took place. So it's not a little bit better, it's 1,000% better. For all the reasons you said. You have to look at the causation.
Yeah, and just to close this, in terms of if we need more staff, I remember seeing Mr. Bennett, I don't know, I think David was at the RCOE Awards ceremony few weeks ago. If
That
you,
woman was very
you
touching.
were there, right? Do you remember who was the classified staff of the year at the county level? It was the attendance specialist from Corona Norco, right? And there were some experiences, some students, they share why that person was able to get to them, right? So if we have the right people there, and if we need more, how I was mentioning, you can make the numbers, right? It's not something that just to have more staff. It's a good financial decision from the financial department, but from the students and the equity, that's the most important thing, right? We need to take care of our finances, but also the most important thing that we can do is to support those students, because we know that that is going to translate into they cannot learn if they're not at school.
But if we can get more staff, that'd be wonderful. I'm very proud of my team because they're sort of smiling because we have those two people. But one thing we talked about 2 weeks ago was pairing up each of those attendance specialists with a community liaison who speaks Spanish. Because on many of our visits, we have to have two people to go out. It's unsafe for them to go out individually. So we already sort of have a plan to double their ability to go out by teaming them with community liaisons. But we certainly can look at and talk about additional folks if you know.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's an ability we have.
I learned from my dissertation and the doctorate program is there's always more than one variable. And
Yeah.
yet they seem to focus on one, and that's the school district. We're not doing this, we're not doing that, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. And it's ridiculous to try to actually convince them that there's all other reasons why. Maybe a kid doesn't come to school because of the fact that they have no way to get there. You know, there's all kinds of reasons. And we do get punished because we don't get paid if they don't come, which is always just strike me, because that we're being punished. We have the same costs, we have the same expenses, but they're giving us less money because the child didn't show up. That kid is still on the person's, on the roster, and the teacher's still responsible for that child, as far as the assessment of what the child is doing. That's just me correcting.
Well, we do know the answer is never that they just don't want to come to school. There's always multiple reasons. Healthy kids want to come to school, want to learn. We know that.
But we get blamed for so many things that is out of our control. And I keep, you know, it's 49 years since I graduated high school. And, you know, and it makes me remember, what did I have to do? What did I have to do to get through with high school? What are we expecting them to do now? And there's no comparison. But it's just so much more now that we have to do than are expected of these kids. And then we keep saying that the schools are failing them. If I had had the same kind of schooling that that they're having now back then, I could have done all kinds of things. A lot more than I did. I don't know, I think we get blamed for way too many things.
And if I may just add, going back to our SARB and our mediation, we do practice the restorative approach. The goal is to listen to the family, identify what the barriers are, address the barriers, and provide a plan that is supportive to both the student and the family. And so that has been a goal and a focus for our SARB and our mediations, and also our SART meetings as well that take place at the school site.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Dr. Freeman was saying, right? That sometimes the schools of specific districts, they get blamed from something that is not under our control. But there are some elements, some variables that they are under our control, and that is something that you are addressing here through the SAR process and with the attendance specialist, something that we can do in order to help our families. So focusing on those that we are under our control. I know there's a lot that they are not under our control. We cannot do anything about it. So let's use that energy focusing on the ones that we have control of and act upon that, how you are doing it. So thank you.
My concern in, say, throughout the last 2 years because of COVID has to deal with our online learning, and where students are sent to online learning. When this program was intended for students that excel, that could work on their own, that could produce and weren't discipline problems and didn't have absentee problems. My concern is that certain students have probably found a hiding place, and we sort of feed into that because we have to do something with these students, and they end up in these programs that they really don't qualify for. And so my question is, who polices them? Are they under the umbrella that any normal student would be that was in that program or had those issues?
So that answer last year is very different than the answer this year. As you know, there's an assembly bill that mandated that any student that wanted distance learning this year was eligible for that.
Yes.
And I think that was out of a place of kindness from the state, that kids that were traumatized or not willing to come back, fearful of COVID, could do that. So there's no question that we had a large group of students, almost 500, over 500 this year, that attended that program, that it probably wasn't the best fit. In a previous year, we would have got to make those judgments. Dr. Garcia's position, formerly mine, would have said, is this a good fit, in concert with the principal there? And we would have made choices. This year, that choice was taken away from us. So now we know many of those students, and we can come back and report out to you specifically on this, did not fare well there for all the reasons you've said.
Yeah.
Now what to do with them 1 year later when they're even more behind, it's really aggravated the problem. And some of them could go back, but that's a big jump back to a large comprehensive high school. We're looking at transferring a large percentage of them, about a third, back to Paris Lake High School, because now they are credit deficient. They
Yes.
reach the age of 16 where that's an appropriate program. But that will create fewer spaces for kids, 10th graders, who are now possibly behind. So all of these have a ripple effect, and you squeeze the balloon, it's gonna bulge somewhere else, right? You're asking such a powerful question that I feel like I could give you a 20-minute presentation just on that. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop there, but it's definitely, and again, it goes back to your comment, what can we control? Under Assembly Bill, very little. Now that that isn't in place, we have actions in place that we can present to you. Our fear is that, like they did this last year, that 2 weeks before, we'll get some very well-intentioned assemblymen who are gonna turn it on its ear once again, and we did not have a lot of lead time. In fact, we had 0, and it was pretty disruptive at the beginning of the year.
So right now, it is mandated, the mandated sunset.
It sunsets and we are back to normal, whatever normal is.
Well, I feel we were making good progress in that area, and of course, COVID sent us backwards.
Absolutely.
And now we're having to restart. And now that we can see, we know what those existing problems were, and try to weed them out, even within ourselves, of what our counselors are suggesting and where these kids are being sent. So they're just not sent out to be, okay, put them through the process, but we know they're going to be nothing. You know, you want them to not be waiting to be put out and then have to struggle through adulthood or whatever that they have to do. So we were really doing well with that, and I'd like to see us work back towards that. And just plain and simple, it was a dumping ground. It was cleaned up, and we need to get back to where it was, I feel, if we can, with all the processes.
From your lips to God's ears, absolutely. I think we need to find a way to get back to some normalcy and getting kids who are a good fit for that, because if you weren't successful in a normal setting, sometimes distance learning is twice as hard, not easier.
Well, some of them aren't doing anything,
Yeah.
still. And,
And
okay.
we're obligated to keep, sorry.
I just want to follow up on the important question that Tony made. So we are at the end, we are at the sunset of that directive that everybody who requested virtual learning, they needed to be there. We don't know for next year yet, right? Well, let me get back. Are we offering virtual learning this coming year, 22, 23?
Absolutely, but
Yes.
we've asked the principal there to go through and recognize who was thriving in
Okay.
that and could continue,
Okay,
who was failing in that setting that opted for it under the assembly bill and should not continue, and to hold SSTs, student study teams, and offer them the next best placement. That could be Paris Lake if they are 16. It could be that they need to go back to the comprehensive high school and have a plan on credit recovery and a return. We are also, and I'm a little premature here, considering a fourth safety net with a company that we're looking at, and it's too early for me to present that to you. We're still in the works with them. It's called Graduation Alliance, and they actually deal with, and support, not deal with, that's a terrible word. They support student dropouts. It's almost an even richer layer of support, and it's a cost neutral because they, that's a whole separate presentation. We're very excited. We've had 3 meetings with them, Israel, and one with the lake, and we're thinking that might be another tier of support that just hasn't been available, because it does reach a point where what is a good option? Now, we know distance learning doesn't work. You got there because the comprehensive wasn't working, and the lake isn't really the best fit either. What is the best fit? We're kind of out of options. So we're exploring a fourth option that we're anticipating bringing to you, but I haven't even pitched it to cabinet yet, and we've met with them, so I think I'm getting out over my skis a little bit on that one, but it's a great question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe.
yeah,
And
just
thank you,
one more thing,
Dr.
Mr.
Garcia.
Ruff and Mr. Stafford. I think this is really, really important, right? Because if the students are not, that is not the right fit. So can we say then that we are getting ready for virtual learning 22, 23? Are we approving and denying applications for parents who have applied for, I want my student to be in VL 22, 23. Principals, they go over the applications and look at the performance of those students and determine what is the best fit for them?
Yeah, they attend an orientation with Mr. Alfred and his team, Principal
Okay.
Alfred, and then they will look at, is this a good fit for your child? And he
Okay.
actually tries to have one-on-one meetings with those families.
Okay.
Afterwards, there's a group orientation if they make that request. So that's one way they could come. Another would be that counselors are doing that work, meeting with families if they're referring from the comprehensive to that program, and they may be triaging and saying, hey, this isn't a good fit. I know you're grasping at straws here, but something different isn't better just because it's different. We need to come, so it's hard to answer that with one simple thing. There
Yeah.
are several
Layers.
checkpoints that could be a stopgap to say, not the best fit for you, not the best fit for you. None of those checkpoints existed last year because all bets are off. If you wanted it, law said you had to get it.
Yeah.
And we did have, sorry to interrupt, but we did have conferences with people and said, even though you have a right to have this, probably not your best choice. And people just plowed through that checkpoint. They were like, nope, law says we can do it, we want it.
Yeah.
We were a little bit stuck.
So from the other perspective, now that we are not obligated to approve it, can we have cases when we say no and the parent insists? Yes, I think that is the case, that they don't agree, that they appeal. But we are convinced that this is not the best for the students. What is
I
the,
think that has happened, and you
Yeah.
have a lot of those. To be honest, I don't think we've had a situation where we just knew it was terrible and the family insisted. In that case, we probably would say, okay, we're gonna let you have one chance at this,
try.
but let's monitor for the
Okay.
first quarter. Because remember, they're on a quarter system, not a semester system where they have accelerated credits.
Actually, they're on a semester system, and typically what happens when the school would get a referral, they would be invited to an orientation, and we would share the information, letting them know what the expectations were for the student and the parent. Sometimes by the end of the orientation, the family would say, you know what, this isn't for us. Sometimes it was a conversation with the administrator to let them know, we're looking at the transcript, we're looking at attendance, because it's all independent work. If you can't work independently, if you can't reach out for help, if you can't, come in when you need assistance, if you can't do that on your own, you're not going to be successful. If we had ever had a family who insisted, we would let them participate on a trial run. Then we would follow up. At that time, I would reach out to Bob, and we would have a conversation about when would be the right time to send the student back. Because we wouldn't want to put the student in a program and then have the student go back behind further than when they had started.
And one just last question. Do we have a virtual learning handbook where we have the expectations and everything? So the parents, is that just during that meeting and they forget about it, but it's something that, okay, look, this is where we talk about it.
I don't know that it's a handbook, it's a flyer that's provided
It's
to
a flyer.
them at
We
the
don't have a handbook.
orientation
Okay.
that outlines the requirements for that program, but she
In
used to run
in
this summer
addition,
before.
there is a PowerPoint, and we did put together a packet. Students were, that was one of their first assignments. They were required to attend the orientation, read through the packet, which spelled out the expectations, and then there were clarifying questions that they had to answer and then submit.
Okay. Would you please share that with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
me, or with us?
We'll share it with the whole board.
Okay, very good, thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up. We're almost done. LCAP Goal 4, this is our parent outreach. This all ties into everything that we have been discussing. So under LCAP Goal 4, we have a few metrics that we measure. As you know, you may not know, most of our trainings and workshops were all held virtually. So we had very little in person. So you can see that our parent participation so far this year is really low. But some of the school sites have started having in person, like ELAC meetings and APAC meetings at the school site, but the first semester, everything was done virtually. So as we move forward, we're probably looking at some type of a hybrid, because some families still don't feel comfortable coming in. So we'll live stream our trainings and workshops. So I have to say that technology, Zoom, we're very proficient at using Zoom in this process, and it's been very interesting teaching our parents how to use technology remotely and getting them set up so that they can participate, in our meetings. So we're looking to continue that going into next year, and we hope that our parent participation, because in the prior years, you can see that we've consistently had over 10,000 parents participate district-wide in any and all of our school events and activities. So as you had said, the last 2 years, we can kind of just reestablish a baseline in moving forward, and that's pretty much the theme for tonight's discussion with a lot of our data points. Since we don't have the dashboard, we've had to resort to DataQuest and CASP and some of the other local indicators that we have. We also were able to increase an additional parent on the Community Advisory Committee, which supports special education. So we've always consistently had one, but we've been able to secure another parent to serve on that at the SELPA level. We also administer the California Healthy Kids Survey through West Ed. We were able to implement that. We did not get the responses that we were hoping for this year. Again, I think parents are overloaded with a lot of stuff. We were able to get a little bit more than last year, 77 parent responses district-wide, 262 staff responses. This particular metric for the staff survey, based on the questions that are produced, we're going to move this metric to Goal 3, so it'll be part of Dr. Garcia's metric. So a lot of the questions really revolve around school safety and wellness. So we're going to be moving this metric into Goal 3 starting next year. Too fast. One thing that we did do quite well, thanks to our contract with Inspire, with Shauna, she's been able to help us facilitate a lot of information using all of our social media platforms. We pretty much doubled, if not tripled, our dissemination of information. And so one thing that we, I think, have done really well this year is the use of our social media platform and be able to help us with the analytics to identify the number of hits, followers, and so forth. So we will continue to, through LCAP, have continued to increase and fund that contract. She's been a great help for us in designing the flyers and also disseminating information on a regular basis. So we're very happy that we've been able to use our social media platforms to the extent that we've had this year. Infinite Campus, our parent portal, we have currently 10,000 parents that have access to their child's information for attendance, suspensions, grades, anything that they can access online. So we're going to continue that metric as well going into next year. Under our LCAP Goal 4, we have 4 actions that we're going to continue to move forward into next year. So 4.1, this is, we're going to keep this parent-teacher communications. This was work that we were hoping to do during the spring of 2019 when COVID hit and we had shut down, our goal was really to get a district focus group that involved community members, teachers, and parents. Because in the prior year, one of our PDs, we were able to have a parent forum, and a lot of what was expressed during that time was really establishing more effective, positive communication between teachers and parents. So we were not able to do some of this work, as you had heard from some of the other directors. We were not able to pull teachers because of subs. So that is a main focus moving forward as part of our district PELI, Parent Engagement Leadership Initiative. So that is going to be a district goal for us so that we can help work with parents and teachers to establish more effective, positive partnerships and collaboration. 4.3, our parent leadership. I think this is probably one of the things that we do very well, and hosting our online trainings and workshops that empower and build capacity for our parents. We've had a lot of success with engagement, even though it's through Zoom and through technology. But we're hoping that with our hybrid that we'll be able to continue to increase that parent participation. Our Action 4.3, which is really the work that Sonia Rezkala has, our community engagement specialist. So the work that we've shared a little bit, our Color Fun Run, we partner with the city on the wellness, health and welfare, health fair. And we also work with them on the Job Shadowing Day and Empowering Youth. So we're continuing to build that relationship with the city and other organizations through Riverside County. 4.4, effective two-way communications, goes back to the work that we have in our contracts with Inspire, which allows us to be able to send out notifications and disseminate information through Blackboard, Peachjar, and using all of our social media platforms. So we will continue moving forward with these 4 actions. We just hope that next year we will have more numbers, increased numbers moving forward. Yes, Dr. Freeman.
With parent engagement, we send out a lot of things virtually. Now, I know we have one-to-one Chromebook for each student. How do we make sure that parents have that same access? Are we having them use the student's Chromebook, which I wouldn't imagine they would want to?
Right.
What do we do to provide for them the same kind of access that we provide to kids?
So we have Chromebooks available for checkout in Ed Services. So when we do parent engagement activities and events, we have a registration link. And so our community liaisons reach out to those parents ahead of time to ensure that they have technology. So we've checked out Chromebooks. We've had them come to SSE. So we have access for them if they need technology. We also ensure that they know, we give them pre-training on how to download the Zoom link so that they can access the presentation virtually.
They have to let you know that
Yes, so when we send out the flyers and all of the information, if you see on our notifications, they always have registration links, and so they will register, and then that allows us to reach out to those parents to find out if they have the appropriate technology. If not, what can we do to help them with that, and then also get them set up with the Zoom link.
I keep remembering one teacher that we went through a whole week of training on using a computer, and she was scared to death even plugging it.
Well, we have a lot of parents, I think, were in that state, but they wanted to be involved and participate. And because we have that was the only way that we can ensure through registration and pre-registration that we get their contact information. And then the community liaisons reach out to them and make sure that they have the appropriate technology. Now, some of them will use their kids' Chromebook, but we make sure that they have access and be able to download the Zoom link, because we found that's the best way to be able to do our presentation. And we also do simultaneous translation. So while we don't have to break and do English, Spanish, we do simultaneous translation under Zoom, which has been fantastic, which has increased our number of EL families participating.
I can't think of any teenager that would willingly let their parents use their computer.
Well, some have. Yeah, some have. But we do give them an option to come and check out, or they are welcome to, come to our SSE. And some of them will log in at the school site. Some of them are parent volunteers, or they're there at the school with their son or daughter, and so they'll log in as well.
When you have the home visits, is that something that they might look into?
Sure. Yep.
We provided hotspots in particular.
Yep. That was all through the initial ESSER and COVID dollars that came through. Yeah. Well, we're very excited moving forward. I think that using the social media and the platforms and the technology has enabled us to, I think, reach more families, especially those now that don't feel comfortable still coming back to the campus. So we're going to accommodate that group of folks as well. And those that do, we will, provide childcare and following all of the protocols that, whatever the county has set up for us. Before I turn it over to Mr. Bruff, I just wanted, this is a great public hearing, probably one of the best ones. I've been doing LCAP for a long time. So this is a public hearing, so everything that you have shared with us, we will take back because it is in draft form. So we'll be able to embed some of those data points that you were talking about on the June 15th before you approve the LCAP. So right now, the draft that is attached to the agenda tonight is in the hands of RCOE through their FastPass system. So they have a team that will be reviewing. So we will bring back to you on the 15th any significant changes that they find that we have to make to the LCAP since this is a public hearing. So we'll bring back those changes on the 15th. And just to reiterate that we are establishing a new baseline. This is a new 3-year LCAP. So it is very hard to compare dashboard data with DataQuest with CASP, and because there's no comparison. So we thank you for your patience in that regard. I think you all understand kind of the situation that we're all in. So this is the year 1 of a 3-year plan, and so we're basically reestablishing a baseline for this LCAP. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bruff, who's going to bring it home.
So often, Ms. Martin, I have like mine, and that was my opening statement, is to thank you. You go. To thank you for all of your questions, because there was a gracious awareness from all of you that this process doesn't really work this year. When we look back 2 years, 1920, 2021, we all know the year in between is like no year we've ever seen. So I want to reemphasize the point she just made, and I think all of you have sort of touched on it, that this year is absolutely sort of a new baseline for every metric that we look at, whether it's distance learning or EL learners or anything we may measure. We just all came back differently. And so this is the baseline, and we want, the focus. We knew the trauma that would come back, and we want to thank you all. We've so many presentations out there. We've talked to you about the focus on mental health and trying to create a nurturing environment. I recently heard an article after the tragedies in Texas about how much should we harden our schools. I don't want to get into that, but one of the responses was, whatever you decide to do in hardening your schools, whatever that is, we also have to soften our schools, that we have to work on mental health and help kids not go over a deep end. And we feel like we've really, with your support, we've committed the dollars, the people, the personnel, and next year we look towards really enriching the synergy between all of those. So we added a lot of new pieces, a lot of new people, and now it's about really getting all of those pieces to dance through an MTSS format and get lots of wraparound services for kids, because we just have so many layers that we didn't have in prior years. Was that a question?
Well, I was just going to throw in the fact that we talked about the students, and I'm thinking, right, we did a good job, I believe, like when we had those 2 days of TV at the wellness, that we went ahead and we were looking at the mental health of the staff. I mean, because you can't cure a kid if the parent, if the grown-up is not doing so good. So we have to be able to pay attention to that as well.
And we believe that's a kind of a framework that we're going to continue to do with our PDA days going forward, because it was such a big success. So we can't look at what's new for next year without just acknowledging we're going to continue to focus on mental health. That just has to be something we do better and better with every year from now on. At the same time, while the focus was on mental health and the focus was on decreasing the failure rate with all the trauma from COVID, at some point we have to get back to rigor and academics and yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Something that just popped in my head. I know that there's been some criticism nationally about SEL, where they think it's something that it's not. And I think it's important that we are aware of that, because kids around us, some people, and they're going to start saying, well, if we're doing this, then it's wrong. And that's what you start having the people coming to the school board meetings and doing stuff that it's crazy.
I think we've heard those comments on some national debates, but I'm yet to meet a parent that doesn't want us to care about their students' social and emotional well-being while they entrust them to us. No.
I just want to be, we keep it in the back of our heads so that if something comes up, we're prepared to deal with it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, anybody on our team is happy to talk with any parent, and we just don't have people come to us and say, hey, stop all that SEL stuff, quit caring about my kid. And I know those might be some national debates, but we're yet to meet that parent. I'm yet to meet that parent. They all want us to teach them, but they also always first want us to care about them. And so, to be honest, that has not been a big problem. I think everyone we've talked to, anything we do in that lane, our parents seem very grateful for.
Well, I'm going to use a word that I hate, proactive. To me, that's active medication. But I believe that because we've been doing it this way, we haven't waited to react to what's been going on like that. Just said this is how we're doing it. I think that's what's probably keeping a lot of this at bay.
Well, I think when we went into distance learning, we were a district that was proactive and we were ready with technology in a way many districts weren't. And then coming back from distance learning, we anticipated mental health and we responded, and I think we've been ahead of that curve. So we want to continue to be that district that anticipates our students' needs and our families' needs and provide it. So we'll try to keep being proactive. That being said, we do, yes, sorry. No, go ahead, Ms. Feo.
So when it comes to, if we're talking more about the mental health side, I know if a child has a problem mentally or like a family problem, I know we have social workers there. And also, if it's like a family problem, like if they want to bring their parents or if they can, you guys also solve it there? Or also do you transfer them to like a family there?
So that answer is so dependent on whatever the particular family need is or the dynamic with this child. Care Solace is something else that the board has invested in, and that's really decreased the waiting times because we were hearing horror stories of kids who were, say, suicidal and called Kaiser or their HMO and they couldn't get in, or Healthy Kids, in months, right, or weeks. We've been getting through that referral service some really good within a week response times for kids. So many times it's a referral out through Care Solace that has a whole network of what services are available to you if you have healthcare or if you don't. It may be a family, oh man, this is a hard question because we could spend an hour on this. This is a good question. So many different scenarios. What, say, a family that a family member was deported? Well, it sends the kid into a huge depression. Well, maybe we connect them with TODEC in sight, right? And they get some legal aid, and we connect them with free legal aid. So I could go on and on. You identify the kind of problem, and our social workers are supposed to do that linkage service to get them the support they need if it's beyond what we have. Now, social workers, in terms of kids at our schools, have some training above and beyond a counselor, and they can actually do therapy. So that's the reason you all voted. We added that counselor who could keep this wellness rooms running, but it would free up the social workers for Tier 3 kids to do actual regular therapy sessions with that social worker. And I want to thank Mr. Al-Zubaydi because he and the mental health team have led a lot of that work.
Is that why the one district recently said that they were replacing all the counselors with some social workers?
I'm not aware of that story. I don't know. Well, I think in the future, you may see more emphasis on social workers because, and Mr. Al-Zubaydi, this is his area of expertise, mental health, they just have that richer level of therapy that our counselors don't always have the same hours or the same training. So we probably, my goal would be in the future to see some dollars dedicated to every school in the state will have a social worker. We've opted to do that because we've been proactive and this board has granted us that, but that's not a state mandate. We just chose to do the right thing, I believe, this year. I'd love to see, and I'm sure Ms. Raines would, some dedicated extra dollars just for mental health and just for social workers.
One
And
way to do that would be to have something where we would have nominated for like a Golden Bell Award just so that you get out there.
yeah, well, I think we've done far more than any surrounding district. We have one at every school, an additional counselor at every school, and a room just dedicated to wellness. And the numbers speak themselves that Dr. Garcia has shared.
I do believe that July 3rd or June 30th is the deadline for submitting nominations.
I'm gonna get on that right now.
I just think it's something that's so totally different and so obviously necessary that the only way that people are gonna find out about it is if they get publicity, and this would be a great way to start doing that without us having to put out a lot of press releases, spending a bunch of money on something we can't.
They've done phenomenal work, and we're looking forward to really solidifying that work next year, making it more systematic through the MTSS work. But I don't want to cut you off on that. We're very, very proud of that work. At the same time, I'm going to go back to that second bullet, and that is that we need to continue to provide that, but we have to get back to rigor in academics and learning, which is our primary goal. So the focus next year is really on literacy. We have hired an additional language arts coach, an EL learner, and this is back to one of the very first questions at the start of this presentation. How do we get out and monitor the implementation? And there are formal ways to do that, but truly some of the best work, as all of you know as leaders, is getting out and walking the classrooms and speaking to people and having that organic coaching. So this EL coach will be able to do some formal trainings, do some follow-up and monitoring to see how the implementation is going, and to have one-on-one organic training time with some of our teachers. So we're excited about having that coach come back on board, and you've all approved that for next year. So that's a real focus. In addition, the A through G counselors that we've added to make that a district-wide focus. And lastly, again, our literacy focus across the district. We have asked every principal, we're meeting with them on the 14th, to commit that every department will commit to reading an article within their domain. So next year, math will read each quarter an article about math applications in the real world. History is always reading historical articles, but as a department, they're going to adopt 4 articles, 1 each quarter, and do a close reading or other kind of close literacy strategy. That will be true for science, the arts. Every classroom across our district will read 4 articles that has something to do with the real world application or relevant to their particular thing. So I'm hoping when I report out to you next year, we'll be reporting a success that there isn't a single classroom in any subject matter that didn't read 4 articles next year and focus on literacy. So that's a real area of focus for next year. Yes, sir.
I guess what we need to come, I think at the beginning when you started as an assistant, and this is related to the coaches, to the new coaches. We used to have, when we even still have the math coaches. So we just need to monitor also and make sure that what happened with the math coaches isn't happening here, that we get some math coaches providing instruction or tutoring to the students directly. Instead of coaching the teachers on how to provide instruction, they were doing directly to the students. So that was not kind of, that was not it's like the best way of intended objective, right? I understand the demo lesson, right? But just individually focusing, okay, we have the math coach, you are going to be working with these students who are kind of falling behind.
You're seeing a quizzical look on my face because I think, and I don't want to make excuses to you, but that was prior to my coming on board. The coaches, they were TOSAs at the time, were disbanded just prior to my arrival. So I'm not real aware, and then we went into COVID. So I can research that. That's certainly not the plan that we're looking at. We're looking at training teachers to be more effective with all of their individual students.
And the reason of this COVID is just to be mindful, probably, just to be on the radar.
Right.
That is something that might happen, right? And that happened already, so we want to learn from that already happened, so it doesn't happen again, and then, we are going to learn from
And I appreciate the highlight, because the focus is not, that we're heading towards, is not on them doing direct service with kids. It's empowering each of our teachers to serve the students on their roles better. But it's a good reminder, and I wasn't aware of that, but it's certainly something I need to be, I'll ask my team. They may have a memory of it before I was focused on that. Yeah. And that ends tonight, but we thank you for not just listening, but for being so actively engaged and asking questions and really having an awareness and giving us grace for not having a comparison year last year. It's been a bumpy ride. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bruff, and everybody who presented today. I really appreciate all the work that went into that presentation, and you guys giving us all that breakdown. And we appreciate all that, listening to us as well, and taking our comments and questions into consideration. So, yep. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so if are there any other speakers on this public hearing? Anybody who would like to speak? No public members? You sure? Come on. It's empty. All right, so that will conclude our public hearing. We will conclude it at 6:32 p.m. All right. So that leads us to 8.2, an action item, business public hearing regarding the adoption of the 2022-23 district budget. So do I have a motion?
So move.
Dr. Arouse, Dr. Freeman for the motion, and that will lead us to our opening of the public hearing for 8.2. And this public hearing is open at 6:33 p.m. We have a presentation. All right.
First of all, I would like to say I know you're going to be very disappointed because it's not going to be an hour and a half. So, but good evening, President Nielsen, Board, Superintendent Bennett, and Cabinet. We're going to go over the 22-23 proposed budget tonight. So we're going to just do a high-level review of the state budget. As in years past, the district's budget is built on the major components of the May revise, but unlike years past, the May revise is going to be significantly different, or the enacted budget will be significantly different from the May revise, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The budget proposals agreed by the legislator leadership will soon be in print in AB 154 and Senate Bill 154, so those will be coming out soon. So, going over the highlight, you can see the difference between the governor's budget, the May revise, and the legislative package. And you can see that the significant difference is the additional LCFF funding increase. So with the governor's May revise, that's about a 9.85% increase overall with the COLA. With the legislative package, it's about 16%. So it will be interesting to see where they land. And we'll find out in the next week and a half or so. So our specific calculation, of course, includes the COLA, and then the supplemental concentration. And then if you remember, the concentration part went up from 55% to 65%, so that was a significant jump. But I do want to kind of point out our specific three-year rolling average for our unduplicated pupil count is at 69.96%, which is fairly low for our district. So we're continuing to feel the effects of the impacts of that three-year rolling average when we took that big dip in 2021 where we went from 73.15 to 71.08. So we'll feel that for a couple of years. So in historical trends and projections, you see the big jump from 2021 to 21-22. That was nearly a 5% growth. Which is unprecedented, and I know that's a word used a lot these days. But considering that most districts are declining in enrollment, we are really in a unique position with all the housing going up and people wanting to move to this area. Unfortunately, our attendance did not see that same growth, but like many districts, due to the COVID surges and different reasonings as Ed Services went into depth about, our attendance definitely went down. We are projecting that we'll get to near pre-pandemic rates in the outgoing years as things get more quote-unquote normal. And luckily with our attendance, we do have the prior year guarantee, and I know that there's several things in both the governor's budget proposals and the legislator to help mitigate the attendance shortfalls for all districts. So our multi-year assumptions, you can see there, I just wanted to kind of hone in on our attendance rate for 21, 22. You can kind of see that's what I was talking about in the previous slide. We're at just under 87.5%. And again, luckily, we do have that prior year guarantee, even if there wasn't, something in the legislative package where that would affect us in the years going forward is if we didn't start climbing in ADA, we would get to that cliff that is.
Remember, 87% is very low.
Is very low.
But we're saved by we had that.
The prior year guarantee. So 1920, we were at 93.09%. So that's what we will be funded off of. And then, like I was saying, there's different proposals in both the governors and the legislator to help mitigate that for all districts.
I noticed in the CSBA thing today, where the legislative is definitely, I didn't go through it completely, but they're making some big chunks of increasing this by taking it out of what he had. And I know that, well, one, I know that it affects community colleges and early literacy. I don't know how that's going to affect this district.
Right.
But, yeah, there's a lot of difference in there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's kind of like us. There's one pot of money, right? It just depends on how it all gets dispersed. So that's what they're negotiating now. So if you look at our unrestricted multi-year projections, I do want to make mention that the 6.5% raises that you all authorized are in the budgets. They're built in there for every employee group already. That's why you kind of see that significant deficit spending in next year. And we'll go over more about the ending fund balances here in a minute. So, as you remember, because we've been saying it for at least the last couple of interim reportings, we're going to be we're going to have a cap on our reserves. So there was 4 criteria that had to be met in order to trigger the cap, and so all 4 criteria have been met, and that is the minimum guarantee that's determined by Test 1. The Proposition 98 maintenance of effort factor has been fully paid from 14-15. That was still outstanding. The 98 minimum guarantee is sufficient to fund COLA and ADA, and the capital gains has exceeded 8% of the general fund revenues. So that's why the cap is there, and we'll go more into that in just a few minutes. Overall, statewide averages for reserve levels have increased, and this is related to what is now known as the COVID bump. And that's basically, many districts, and ours is included, and thanks mostly in part to Ms. Raines and our Ed Services team for strategically using our COVID dollars to help build up our savings for our general fund reserves. So we're also have a larger reserve, as you've seen as well. So the following are going to be recommended to be committed by resolution on June 15th, along with the adopted budget. So you notice that we do have some reserve for deficit spending, and as was seen in the multi-year projections, our third year out, we go down to 10.56%. So we're just barely over that 10% cap, because we are deficit spending every year. So we definitely want to reserve some of that for that, and of course for our school resource officers, so kids feel safe coming to school. For our social workers and wellness centers, as was discussed in length with Ed Services, how important that work is for our students overall. And then, of course, for any increases to our special ed contribution. So some of the risks that are coming to the budget for long-term and the forecast. So one of the ones, the inflation. I think everybody feels that, especially most of our employees and our families at the gas pumps. We discussed, our Ed Services team discussed how families have struggled to get their kids to school. That could be a reason why. It costs more to go to the grocery store. You come out with a couple bags, it's still $80, and you're like, what did I buy? There's not even any meat in here. Or $7 in some places. Yeah, it's quite mind-boggling. The supply chain bottlenecks, which is also driving up prices, right? Because it's taking longer to get items, and so vendors are having to, subsidize their costs and passing that on to consumers. The volatility of the stock market, as we've seen, and of course, the Ukraine-Russian war. So, what are the next steps? I'm sorry? Prayer. Oh, prayer. Never hurts. So we're having this open public hearing tonight to receive input on the district's budget. A final budget will be presented to the board on June 15th. The district's adopted budget, along with the local control accountability plan, will be reviewed by the county as well, and their input taken as well. And then after the California state budget is adopted on June 15th, we will need to come back to you in August with a 45-day revision, because there will be some significant changes.
And if I could just add, normally our budget presentation is at least, if not more, lengthy than the LCAP presentation, because it's got LCAP and everything, else in it. We spend a lot of time going over the May revision, because that, kind of provides that cornerstone last look to build the budget. I can't think of a time in my career where I've seen such differences. And so what you see, you did a great job putting it together and presenting it, but it's wrong. It will be wrong because it will change very significantly. It is incomplete, and so we thought a better use of all of our time would be to present a much more complete picture when we have that state budget package, and all of it will change.
With that, is there any questions?
Can you go back to the slide where we have the red numbers?
The multi-year projections?
The multi-year projections. Okay, so from 21, 22, the deficit, we can say decrease was when the ending balance was very bad, right? And for 22, 23, it's $8.5 million. Ending balance, we're going to be in red. You mentioned because of the 6.5% that we have for this. But if we can get a quick, brief explanation, I don't know if that is possible, to understand, yes, we are offering 6.5, but we are getting 6.5 in color.
Correct.
And from that 6.5 overall, only 70% is going to go to the 6.5 that we are giving to our staff, to our district employees. So how come there's an increase of $7.5 million if we are getting the same money and actually from the other 30%? I know that there is inflation. They might be a little bit more, right? The 6.5, let's say 10%, but it's 10% over the 30%. Right? So how come it's 7.5?
And of course, it's not all of it, but the majority of it is the increase in statutory benefits and health and welfare, right? So as PERS and STRS go up, that's not included in the COLA, right? So we gave 6.56. We didn't back into whatever our statutory benefits are going up. So unemployment is still up, workers' comp is still up, and then, of course, there was a significant increase in the STRS, and I believe that's in the assumptions. I left that in there. So you can see that STRS is going up nearly 3%. So that's quite significant. So that's 3%, on every dollar that we pay classified members. And then, of course, STRS is closely after that, so.
Yeah, but we pay STRS with the 30% left, right? Or it's part of the 70 still. And if we are getting a 3% increase, when we are getting part of 6.5, I'm just trying to understand the perspective. Like the numbers,
Do you want, maybe you could explain it better.
Candace. Candace.
Let me just hobble up here for. No, and we don't take it as questioning.
No.
Because and you and I have had this conversation before, whereas Alicia's not picky. So one of the things he's talking about, he's saying 70%, but it's actually in the 80% of our budget is made up of salaries and benefits. So, remember the cornerstone to this budget is that it's not correct yet, because we don't have all of the pieces of information. So in the May revise, the governor proposed the 6.56 COLA. That's statutory. That's going to be in all the plans, correct? An additional 2.1 billion to help offset learning loss, STRS and PERS increases, and that sort of thing. We do not have that in the budget. The County Office of Education and School Services of California both have cautioned districts to only include the COLA. So we only have a small piece of the increase. And so that number that you're seeing and appropriately noticing is increasing in the deficit amount. That will change when we get more information. There's also one-time expenditure. So whenever you have a one-time expenditure, you can expect to see deficit spending. And if we were to go back and look at interim report and budget, if we even went to other districts, you're typically going to see deficit spending of a higher number in the budget year that we're talking about. So that's a very good observation. Yes, but a great question.
You're saying in August we're going to reboot this?
And hopefully I won't have a boot. And as I stand here, it's like throbbing more.
Any other questions?
Did I answer that question for you? Okay, thank you. I don't mean to sit down prematurely. Yes.
Okay.
And Alicia won't be here in August, if you don't remember from.
Yeah.
So I'll fly solo for a while. Dr. Rao will help me. But
All right.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, sorry, Grant and President Nelson, Alicia will be the new CBO in Alvord on July 1st.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We will miss you.
We'll give her an insult.
Thank you. Ms.
All
Hogan.
right, thank you.
All right, so we are there any other comments, questions, anything for the public hearing? Seeing no one coming up, we're going to close the public hearing at 6:48. And now we do need to take a vote on 8.2. And I believe we need to go back and vote for the previous one, but let's take care of 8.2 right now. So please
move.
vote. This
Oh,
is-
we are just voting?
We are
Oh,
voting, yes.
Okay.
Okay, 8.2 passes, 5 in favor, 0 opposed, and I am being told that we did need to vote on the previous point, 8.1 for the LCAP. So are we taking an oral vote, or do you want me to go back and I can at least attempt it. I can ask for it. Do you remember who made the motion, who made the second? Because that did not stay in the system. Dr. Freeman with the motion and Trustee Vallejo with a second. Okay, no other questions for 8.1. We're going back to the previous point. So everybody please vote. And 8.1 passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. And we've already done 8.2, which takes us to 9.1, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Dr. Freeman and Dr. Arouse, please vote. (9.1) passes, 5 in favor, 0 opposed, and then this board meeting is adjourned at 6:50. Don't go anywhere. We have another one. CMI. Another 2-hour meeting for CMI too. All right, the CMI board meeting is up if you'd like to join. I'm sorry? Okay, so we are going to start the the California Military Institute Board meeting for today, June 6th at 6:51. Um, 3.1, information item, invitation to address the Board of Trustees on non-agendized items, no takers. 4.1 is action item, it's a public hearing for the California Military Institute's Local Control Accountability Plan and annual update for the 2022-2023 year. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Trustee Vallejo and Dr. Arauz with a second. So we will now open the public hearing for the CMI LCAP plan. Well, the P stands for plan. I don't know why I just did that, but we're going to open that at 6:52.
So, as you recall, I'm Rebecca Beagle. I'm assistant principal at California Military Institute. Dr. Milos couldn't be here tonight, so I'm going to present and even attempt to, because if I miss anything, I know I got some backup people here that will interject and over here as well. So if I miss anything, I'll allow them to interject or even turn around and be like, did I miss it? But please, if you have questions as well, I'm very happy to stop and slow down and answer those as well. So, and some of it will be very redundant from what you heard in the district's LCAP plan, but of course, these are our goals, which then are overall general, or the overall funds you'll see there, and then our LCAP funds are a little bit over $4 million that we'll review tonight. So in regards to our English learner indicators, you'll see that it's not being calculated. A lot of things are due to COVID, not having some of the data. Our reclassification rate, I am going to turn to Mr. Tippie because we've increased our amount of reclassification, our RFEP students this year from the past few years, right? I didn't know if that was the exact number, but I'm very excited to have seen already that the LPAC scores returning and the amount of students that we're seeing did score at 4s, but also we have a very large number that increased to 3s as well. So I'm excited to see that because that just means we're going to see more students reclassify in the next few years as well. And then you'll see, again, our teachers are 100% credentialed in their areas. All students have access to the correct standards and aligned materials for each standard. And so with this, you'll see the budget expenditures and then the actuals, and we're going to continue. We're not going to change any of these action items. These are things we're going to continue to work on. Specifically, you heard it in the district that there's a focus on literacy. That's what we've been focusing on. We have actually had, obviously it's been difficult to send people to trainings. We've actually some conferences have opened up recently, and at least in this past semester where we've sent staff members to conferences. A lot of them, though, obviously in the past few years have been the virtual meetings, but we also had a coach that we had coming onto our campus 1 to 2 times per month. And when I say 1 to 2 times, that means she would come 3 to 4 times per week in that month and work with groups of teachers, sometimes even individual teachers, solely focused on literacy in English and then even helping some of the math middle school teachers. But there was a huge focus on literacy at CMI this year. We also continue to increase our systems of support, those targeted support systems through our MTSS team, led by Mr. Henderson, our other assistant principal, and his team of teachers and actually support staff members of different capacities on campus. Just continuing to increase all the Tier 1 and then even Tier 2 and 3 services and interventions. Technology supports are also there as well, and trainings provided via technology in very much the same content areas that we heard from the district LCAP overall or overview as well. Next up on our goal number 2, I'm happy to report that as of today, 100% graduation rate. We had 2 kiddos as of Friday that were Like, come on, guys, you got a few assignments. We knew we'd get them there. We keep saying we're dragging them there no matter what. But 100%, we did senior checkout today, and so they were very motivated to get everything done because we were not handing them their cap and gown until they did everything they were supposed to. And they want to decorate their caps, so they really wanted to get it done ahead of time. As well as our A through G completion rate is at 100%. Also looking forward to getting our AP scores back, but of course we don't have those yet. We did have an increase in AP students taking the AP test this year as opposed to last year. Obviously, it was difficult for them to do that last year being virtual, but we did have an increase. I'm so hoping to see an increase in pass rate as well. And then 100% FAFSA completion. That's something that that we boast as well. That was another thing that we made sure before we gave them a cap and gown they could finish actually checking out, was they had to have their FAFSA completed. Along with that, our AVID participation, you'll see that the participation rate this year did decline as opposed to the baseline in 2021. One reason for that is the amount of intervention classes that we had to increase at our school, specifically related to math and English, because when students came back to us this year, we found that, yes, a lot of them did not do a lot of work last year virtually, and we needed to provide some credit recovery courses specifically in math and English. And so some things had to give a little bit, and that was AVID for some students and for some courses. Our hope is that we'll continue to increase that with the funding through LCAP in the next coming years. College and career indicator, obviously, again, we don't have that due to the California dashboard, but we're hoping to see with all of those indicators an increase. So again, with the opportunities for remediation and support services and interventions, I've spoken to you about some of those things. We have tutoring, we have paper.co, which is a tutoring online 24/7 online tutoring that students use, but even teachers use that, not just for tutoring, but it's like essay completion. Before you turn the essay in, you're going to use that. So students are using that a lot for some of just the tier 1 interventions available for all, but so are parents. So when the parents are frustrated, we're like, you have this resource that you get to use as well. So things like that that are available to all students. Post-secondary opportunities, obviously, we have a focus on college and career readiness. We like to keep that 100% on all of our college and career type indicators. We want to keep seeing that the indicators on the dashboard increase once we start getting those reports back again. But we like to keep it 100%. And we're going to keep a focus on that and using resources and funding through LCAP specifically for keeping our college and career indicators high. In regards to goal number 3, our suspension rate, we love to see it low all the time as well. And you'll notice the numbers there, the baseline numbers and the outcomes for this year. Increased just slightly, but you know, that won't. CMI, when we enroll students, that one of the ways that they are able to be enrolled is they can't have behavioral issues that are, that's a pattern of behavior for at least a year. Well, most students who enrolled last year didn't have behavior issues because they were virtual learning. So we did see a slight increase in suspension rate because some of those students slipped through the cracks of just being virtual learning and not having, and it was difficult for some of them. So of course, we did have to use suspension with the progressive discipline that Dr. Garcia talked about. We did have to eventually use suspension, but our social worker and our MTSS team and the interventions that we do have on campus really help to continue to keep this suspension rate down. We love to see this slide right here, where 0 expulsions this year, just like we typically have in previous years, or at least being very low, but we fortunately did not have to expel any students this year. You'll notice our attendance rate, just like with the rest of the district and probably every school in this entire world, we saw a decrease in attendance. Typically, we actually, pre-pandemic, were around 95 to 96. we loved seeing that number, but even in 2021, you see the baseline data or numbers there. Although we are at 90%, and that is higher than most, for us, it's not the typical. So of course, we want to continue to increase our ADA and attendance rates there, and you'll see the same thing with our chronic absenteeism rates. Unfortunately, COVID kept a lot of students out, but we also had the same issues of needing to go out and make some home visits. And our social worker was a part of helping with those things. And then as well as making everyday phone calls from our attendance office, our attendance clerks calling these parents. A lot of them, it would be one kid sick, all of them stay home. We have lots of families.
Do you have the same safety net that they talked about?
Yes, absolutely. Everything, that's why I say a lot of this is redundant because we're,
It's actually not correct.
well, what do you
Under-
mean safety
I'm
net?
sorry, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
So, but it probably will be correct. So, under current law, charter schools are excluded from that prior year, but the governor proposed to allow that for 1 year for the charter school for this last year, and that is one of the elements in the attendance proposal. We didn't get into all of this because, you know, it's all over the place, but that is one element that all parties seem to agree on. So you probably will be right, you just don't know it
Yes,
yet.
yeah, got you.
I think she thought
Thank you.
about the safety net of the social worker going out to provide
I
that
did.
service.
I did, but that, no, that's helpful too, because yes.
Okay. She meant we have those additional safety net resources to do the linkage service, I think, what Dr. Beagle mentioned.
Either way,
They do
all of it
not
together.
have- Candace is correct, they don't have the safety net for attendance rates.
And you mentioned the attendance specialists do the home visit.
We don't have attendance specialists. I think they do support us some, Dr. Garcia, they do. We obviously don't need as much support as some of the other school sites, but we do a lot of in-house phone calls, and I've even personally made, on the egregious ones, like, let's get out there and I'll take my social worker or a counselor. That happened more at the beginning of the year, just trying to make sure, like, you enrolled with us, we want to know where you're at. But yes, they do support us as well. And then, of course, 0 incidents in regards to annual Williams report. So we'll continue to have universal supports and training in areas that will help with Tier 1 practices, as well as the Tier 2 and 3 intensive and targeted supports. We as well have a social worker and a wellness center that we absolutely love. I'm going to say her name. Our social worker's name is Marina Cunningham, and nobody can steal her. Like, she is ours. Do not take her. She is absolutely amazing.
She was an intern, because one of the programs we didn't mention is, in addition to the social workers and the counselors, we have partnered with Cal Baptist and San Marcos, and Mr. Alzabedio had to go, but he oversees those people as interns. Ms. Cunningham was an intern finishing her program, and then we were able to hire her, and it's been a seamless transition. It's one of the reasons she's been able to do such phenomenal work, because she was already at home in our district. So we not only have the social workers, but we have this kind of, feeding program to bring them up as well. It's been really good. Minor leagues.
Yes.
It's a farm system. It's a farm system. There we go.
But
she is
yes,
phenomenal.
she is phenomenal, and she, of course, the data, I don't know, I may have missed it, the data that she even presents just from CMI, the amount of students who she sees on a daily, weekly basis. It's amazing. That is just a testament to the wellness center, social workers, that system and program that has been brought in, I know, district-wide. I see it obviously on our school site. Our students feel safe. There's just another safe place for them to go to, and so I don't ever want to see that go away. I'm going to say that right now. But I also don't want to ever see Ms. Cunningham go away. She's amazing. Yes.
For the budgeted and the estimated actuals, 3.2 is 4 times as much as the budgeted amount. Is there any particular one reason or set of reasons why it's 4 times what was budgeted?
That's a great question.
Well, if I could pull up my handy dandy spreadsheet, but I'm going to venture to guess that that may have been some additional materials and resources, and maybe even some incentives that we've increased or used.
Would that,
I can,
Yes. So are we budgeting for 40,000 next year instead of 10,000? If that's what we will be experiencing going forward?
SARS, I need the CMI. I'm sorry.
No, I kind of pulled that out of nowhere, but I did see that number and it kind of jumped out at me, so I was just wondering.
So these are the estimated actuals, so this is what we spent this year. So if you give me a second, I can see what's budgeted for 3.2 moving into next year.
Okay, I appreciate it, thank you. I'm sorry, you can go ahead.
That's fine. You want me to move on and then we'll, okay. Sure, absolutely.
Give that to me a little bit.
Next up, you see student engagement and participation. So again, those tiered approaches in regards to increasing, so incentivizing students to be at school, having programs, resources for them to just re-engage them into the setting. Just academic setting, but also social emotional. We've brought people out to do some social emotional training and safety. Even some professionals came out for our middle school students in particular to speak specifically about online safety and computer safety, things like that. So we often have those types of support and resources coming out, and I'm very happy that they can come out in person now, because the virtual stuff, of course, we use Thrively and Ripple Effects, all the same thing, but those in-person support systems are a lot, whatever. They really do it well. The kids pay more attention too, and they're more fun to watch rather than here we are with another online.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, it was for the PBIS, so that was for Positive Solutions, which is a contract that we have. So I believe that additional services were added to the contract to help support with PBIS and bullying. And I believe that we did add more for.
Positive Solutions is the
I can't remember the person's name.
drug courses
Yeah.
that we talked about, because we did see an increase with students being at home and particularly vaping and marijuana. And Dr. Garcia referred earlier to the Positive Choices classes. So that's the increase. When we saw that need, it was ramped up a little bit, quite a bit more than expected.
Okay, I understand that, but are those expenditures expected to be going forward? So our budget will now jump up to close to 40,000
We
for going
anticipate that
forward?
being an ongoing need.
Okay,
Yes.
So the positive versus,
Positive Solutions,
yeah, that, what is that specifically?
I can have, Dr. Garcia, you want to speak to it, or I can, or?
So Positive Solutions is a contract we have with Teresa Blackard. She is a counselor who provides the group counseling at all of our sites. Like Mr. Bruff mentioned earlier, prior to this year, she was working with maybe 2 or 3 sites. This year, moving into this year, we wanted to open it up to more of the sites in addition to CMI. So she provides 2 groups, the positive decision making and the substance abuse awareness. She does that during the school day and also on our Scholar Saturdays.
And it goes back to what Mr. Freeman was saying earlier, that, in the old days, you smoked marijuana once, you were suspended, smoked it twice, you were expelled. Those days are long gone, especially after Assembly Bill 1729, other means of correction. So now if a student is found to be, under the influence or using, we want them to have this intervention class, not just get them in that cycle of punishment.
Remembering that zero tolerance, that honor student, 7th grader in Corona was expelled because he had a fingernail clipper. Yeah, zero tolerance.
Oh, that was after Columbine, when there was a law that said if you had a blade, it was a mandatory expulsion.
Right.
And then there were some crazy cases like that. And that was actually amended statute-wise, because it got pretty crazy.
So the intervention is like 2 classes, and then like, do you guys do something else? It's like, what if you don't know that you can be using it?
So it's an ongoing, I think there's 10 sessions, so they might be pulled out of a different class, maybe first period this week or second period. We don't want to always pull you from the same class, but it's a 10-week course, and the kids actually get a certificate that they've completed a substance abuse course.
There are 2 different pathways. You have drug one and you have literature. So that they could have 10 of each.
So if you're fighting, you might get the better choices class. If you're smoking, you're gonna get the smoking class. Some kids need both classes. Exactly.
No problem. And then lastly, our LCAP goal number 4, which is parent participation. You say that same thing. We wish we could have had more parent engagement. It's difficult. when it was still online first semester. We've been able to open our doors a little bit more up to them to come on campus. I don't know if you follow our social media, last week, I think it was Thursday, we were able to honor specific parents who just were there every time. They're pretty much made up a lot of those numbers this year of the ones being online, being on the Peli online virtual meetings, they're the first ones to say, I want to come and help fill up snack bags for kids, for incentives and things like that. So we have great parent participation, and we're going to continue to hopefully increase that and actually be able to open our doors for in-person things. So you see that information there. Didn't have too many parent survey responses. About half of our staff responded, or it's half of teacher staff. But with that, we also have, we continue to increase in number of followers on our social media. Parent portal, we usually have parents that have great, like they really access parent portal. Oftentimes they need a lot of help, and it's very difficult to we can have all kinds of different documents to give them, but they want help and assistance. So our front office is always available, and we always have loaner Chromebooks up in the front and help to support them and walk them through how to use parent portal and different ways of communicating with our school. So here's the budget and the actuals for our two-way communication that we're going to continue using and offering and providing support and services for the parents, and then continuing, like I said, to provide parent leadership and hopefully increase that again, have actual in-person coffee with the principal, in-person workshops, in-person parent nights for FAFSA completion, things like that, which, again, we did online, but of course we're going to see a much bigger turnout when we are able to do it again in person. And lastly, community engagement and outreach in regards to just strengthening our school program and community. We're going to continue to have plenty of opportunities for our students to even serve the community. It's a great way for our students in our school to link with the community. We did not actually even make community service a requirement, but we suggested we still had a huge number of community service. It's just the type of parents and the type of students that we have. And so our community calls upon us all the time, and we love to be able to support our district and community, and we'll continue to use our resources programs to continue working on improving that as well. So that is all I have. Any other questions that myself or my team can answer?
All of this with something to do. I think that for our reclassification program, we need to have a slogan, and I'm thinking may the fours be with you. I told you I had to stop.
Yeah. I'll take it. Anything else?
All right.
Thank you very
any
much.
Other questions? No. Thank you, Ms. Dr. Beagle, for helping, for giving that presentation, all that information. And no other comments, no other questions from the community? No. So we will close this public hearing at 7:14. And then we'll vote. So go ahead and vote on 4.1, please. 4.1 passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. And that leads us to 4.2. This is an action item, public hearing regarding the adoption of the 2022-23 California Military Institute budget. Do I have a motion? Dr. Freeman, Trustee Vallejo, and we will open this public hearing at 7:15.
Okay, one more time, I promise you don't ever have to hear from him again. Okay, so CMI is also going to get the 6.56% COLA on their base as well. Their supplemental concentration is 20%, 65%. Their average 3-year rolling unduplicated count is at just under 91%. They usually hover around 92, 93%, but they also dropped last year. They also will continue to go down. Goes up a little bit next year. The calculation's a little wonky, but if for some reason, like, if they go up, then that helps it, in the years out. But if they continue to go down, then it will start to go down in the out years as well. So their assumptions is based on their cap enrollment of 1,050 students, and then we are projecting that they will also get to pre-pandemic attendance rates. As Rebecca had mentioned, they are at 90.53% right now, and currently they do not have the prior year guarantee, but hopefully they will at least get that 1-year reprieve. So in their multi-year projections, they too are deficit spending, and the raises are included for all CMI employees as well in the 22-23 projected budget. So that's in there as well, and then the 2% in the 23-24 year. And they do not have the reserve caps that districts have. So I don't have any committed balances to bring forward to you. So like the district, same recommendations. The next steps, we'll have a final budget presented to you on June 15th. And that will go along with their local control accountability plan. And that will also be reviewed by RCOE. And then they too will need a 45-day revision, because if that base at the base goes up by either the governor's proposal of the 2.1 million or billion, billion, or the legislator, either one will be significant, and we'll need to do a 45-day revision. So with that, is there any questions for CMI?
I have a question.
Sure.
Specifically for CMI and for both of you. I noticed that the total 88 per student is 15,000 for a charter school.
The high school portion.
Yeah, the high school portion. And for regular, it's like 13,000. Why that different? It's like consider a charter school, it's more money. When actually there are some constraints on the level of students. We have been mentioning the demographics that come to a charter school, in this case, CMI, right? So the challenges, the services, but we know that. So why would be that reason?
So their unduplicated count is 90.86%. Ours is in the 69% range. So that is the big difference, is your supplemental concentration dollars.
And if you go, sorry to rewind too far, but if you go back to revenue limit days, some of us remember that right before LCFF, there was different funding for unified districts and elementary districts and high school districts, and for charter schools. So charter schools didn't follow any one of those models. When LCFF came out, charter schools now fall, and there's grade spans. So like in this example, and we're missing, K through 3, because we don't offer that even at the charter school. So there's a different base amount for each grade span. COLA is applied to all of, whether it's a charter school or the high school district, but at a different level for the different grades. And then the differences is what Alicia was focusing on, is the supplemental concentration. So they're going to get more having a higher unduplicated pupil count.
Okay, so that would be.
Yes.
Yeah, because in the regular system that is a charter, we still have that difference by grade span.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, I pulled it up just so I could.
Yeah, I remember from the other presentation.
Yeah, that's good memory.
Yeah.
But it makes it that, and that unduplicated pupil count, and that's why, help me with what it's called. Not the free and reduced, the alternative income forms, that have to be, worked on, is so important. Your point is great, that's a huge, difference, and that's so 13,259 for the district for the same grade span, 15,170, and that's solely a condition of their unduplicated count being so
Right.
higher.
But I think because a lot of parents opt to and choose to go to that school, they also opt to and choose to do that form, which translates to more dollars. Too.
Right.
That's an excellent point.
Right.
Yeah. I'm
Way to
to
wrap
frame
it
it
up.
positive for those parents and not the negative for our others, yeah.
Fogarty?
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, concerns, questions from the community? Seeing no one coming to the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:20. Okay, please vote. Okay, 4.2 passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Leads us to 5.1, which is a motion for adjournment. Do I have the motion?
Second.
Dr. Freeman, Dr. Arouse. Yeah, please vote. .1 passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed, and this board meeting is adjourned at 7:21. You may now leave.